Class is in session. This is the College Fantasy Football Big Board presented by the Rookie Big Board Podcast Network. I'm your host, Matt Hicks, the FF Educator, joined as always by John Lobb, the Gridiron Scholar. We're going to be breaking down our top 12 college fantasy football tight ends and opening up the mailbag. We know tight ends can be a tough position here, so we wanted to go beyond just our rankings. We're opening up the mailbag. We have about 7 questions from our listeners, the patrons in the Discord. So we're going to talk college fantasy football tight end listener questions as well. John, before we jump to the top 12, how are we doing tonight, my man?
I'm doing great. It's Scott Fishbowl season. So I got my t-shirt on. I can't wait for the draft tomorrow morning. So, we're full-fledged NFL college fantasy football season. I'm fired up. And I've been studying the tight ends this week, so I feel really good about our show. All my research has been done, Matt.
All right, well, let's go ahead and get into it here. Our consensus number 12 tight end for college fantasy football is Ryan Jones out of East Carolina. Number 11 is Joshua Simon out of Western Kentucky University. Brant Kuthi out of Utah. Payne Durham out of Purdue. Jaheim Bell out of South Carolina, and coming in number 7 is Sam Laporta out of Iowa. Now, John, it's interesting with the tight end position. There's a lot of different directions you can go in. Who stands out here for you from this group?
First thing I want to say, if you look at this group, Matt, we are in general talking about systems, schemes, programs. As an example, Sam Laporta, Iowa, Noah Fant, TJ Hawkinson, George Kittle, Dallas Clark, all under Coach Kirk LaFrentz. The Hawkeyes use tight ends. They recruit them. They coach them up. They have a system. They've also had other good tight ends that just didn't become NFL stars. So you see that. Payne Durham, a passing game that was ranked in the top 5. They lose David Bell. You know they're going to throw the football. At Purdue, there's Payne Durham. Joshua Simon coming back. Western Kentucky last year. He missed the season. They're going to try to keep the same offense. They lost their coordinator, but they promoted a young man underneath them, and the Hilltoppers want to throw the football a ton. And then Brant Kuthi, Utah. Matt, they suck up those safeties and linebackers with that running game. They have Cameron Rising, who's also a dual threat quarterback. They just keep sucking in these defenders, and then they hit you over the top with the tight end. So what we have here are players that we feel confident in the scheme that they're running. Now, Ryan Jones, ECU. Interesting player. He was a freshman last year, Matt. Believe it or not, he finished 26th overall in PPR scoring formats. Not a great player, but the Pirates are going to throw the ball. They're in the American Athletic Conference. I should have counted, but there's at least 9 guys in the 25 ahead of them who are now in the NFL. So you're looking at a player who's projected to be much more involved in the passing game for ECU and has been very impressive. 37 receptions as a freshman, 442 yards and 5 touchdowns. So
that's impressive for a freshman tight end anywhere.
First we'd be happy with the rookie tight end in the NFL. So you're talking 18, 19-year-old young man who does those kinds of numbers. It's very impressive. Simon is he healthy? He didn't make any catches last year, didn't play. The reports indicate that he should be healthy when training camp opens. If Simon's there in training camp, Matt, he could be the type of guy with that massive ceiling. Isaiah Likely last year with Coastal Carolina, where he just gets fed the ball. Brant Kuthi last year, number 10 amongst tight ends, Matt, in the Utah system. 50 receptions, 6 touchdowns, and 661 yards. Payne Durham's, a lot of people are higher on him than I am.
Including me. You pulled him down.
I know. I mean, he won the Twitterverse poll that I put up this week. I have him at like number 12. Obviously,
John had him at 12. I had him at 5.
There you go.
Him into the bottom half.
Yeah, obviously, I'm like, maybe am I missing something? So I studied him a lot. There's no question about he has everything that you want. Let me get to his profile that I was just working on. Give me half a second here. And I always admit when I have to think or look around. 6'5", 255. He's got it. He's got NFL size. However, are they really going to pepper the tight end at Purdue? I mean, do I expect an uptick? I do. But if you look at David Bell, Rondell Moore, the way that system Jeff Brom uses it, I just have a few questions. Is he the one who's going to get 100 targets? If he does, Matt, it's incredible. Only 2 players had 100 targets. Here's a good tidbit. One we're going to talk about later today. The other one was Trey McBride. So only 2 tight ends last year had 100 targets. So when you're getting into over 90 at the tight end, which might be possible if Purdue tweaks the offense. That's my only concern. That's why I have him lower. But I get why everyone else likes him. And you had him at number 5, so I totally get it. Jaheim Bell. Matt, the athleticism is off the charts. There's no question about his athletic ability. He dominated in the Duke Mayo Bowl last year. Wasn't that the game where one of the coaches got Duke?
Oh, they sure did. Yeah, they got the mayo all over him, man.
That's right.
It was Beamer.
So I was watching Bell. He totally dominated. Let's see. He had 5 catches, 159 yards, and 21 rushes, 20 yards rushing, 3 carries. I'm starting to believe in Spencer Rattler just enough. Matt, if Spencer Rattler, their quarterback play for the Gamecocks was so bad last year. I mean, they literally had in the bowl game
transfer.
Yeah.
We had a weekly bit. Who was starting for the Gamecocks on the TFF show? Yeah.
It was unbelievable bad. In the bowl game, they had a running back who was like playing a wishbone option wing T quarterback. I mean,
Zeb Nolan.
Rattler's clearly a major upgrade on anything that they were throwing out last year. So if you're looking, I look at Bell, right? Last year, he had 30 catches for 497 yards and 5 touchdowns. I mean, I can't even name who the Gamecocks were throwing out there. And you just alluded to, they had a grad student who didn't even suit up in the beginning of the year, right? Like a coach who was a grad student.
He was a grad coach. Here's my question for you when it comes to the South Carolina offense. And I know he transferred in later in the spring, right? But are we worried about Stogner coming in taking out of Bell's targets, right? Because Stogner came over from Oklahoma with Spencer Rattler essentially as a package deal. We know Spencer Rattler likes Stogner. That was probably his only key target that he really clicked with chemistry-wise at Oklahoma. So are we just assuming that Bell has enough of a head start there?
Well, so I do think he has enough of a head start. I also think he's much more athletically talented than Stogner.
Yeah, because I like Stogner. Stogner's good.
I think he has he can block and he has some good skills. But I think Bell can be special, Evan Ingram type special. Why I think Bell's the guy, Matt, he can play H-back. They'll probably put him in the backfield for 1 or 2 carries a game. You could even put him in motion out at the Z or the Y. I don't think he can play the X, depending on how. I think Stogner's more of your, in general, inline blocker, line him up. Bell and him will be on the field in 2 tight end formations, but I think Bell's the more dynamic of the 2. And of course, I'd like to put Bell in the top 3. The only reason I don't have him that high is because Stogner is clearly a concern, but what I see is a more explosive playmaker down the field. I don't know if Stogner can beat a safety 30 yards down the field. I do believe Jaheim Bell can do that. So, that's why I think the ceiling, and that's why I'm looking for ceiling. I mean, when I'm doing my tight end, if I'm dumpster diving, and we'll talk about this a little later, I'm looking for a guy with a high ceiling. And if I don't get it in 2 weeks, I switch to my waiver wire. So I like Bell there. And then Laporta is just your classic Iowa. Their offensive line was so bad, Matt. Their quarterback play was so bad last year. And then I'm looking at Laporta's numbers here. Despite all of the disaster, he had 53 receptions, 670 yards, and 3 touchdowns. I believe it's Petrus is the quarterback. That's his last name. He should win the job. Matt, if he just has an uptick in efficiency and that offensive line, which I've been reading, Iowa expects the line to play better. I think they lost one starter from last year. Well, I think it's the center, which is an important piece, obviously. But the Hawkeyes are more optimistic that that offensive line will play better next year, which is good for Laporta.
All right, let's go ahead and jump into our top 6 here. As always, if you're watching on YouTube here, feel free to drop a comment. Let us know who we're too high on, too low on. If you're listening, drop it in the Discord. If you do not have access to the Discord, head on over to patreon.com/theFFeducator. Get access to some personalized CFF insight, as well as Devi Dynasty and all things fantasy football. Here's our number 6. It's Benjamin Yurosek out of Stanford. Marshawn Ford out of Louisville is coming in at number 5. Zach Kuntz out of Old Dominion. And then number 3 is probably a shock to nobody. It's Michael Trigg. And unless you're getting really cute, you also know the order of the top 2. It is Brock Bowers as our consensus number 2 and Michael Mayer as our consensus number 1. So it's interesting here, John. I think for most folks, there's Mayer and Bowers as a tier. Trigg is by himself. And then I think most would argue that Kuntz through Yurosek here are pretty much in that same group as the first 6 we talked about.
Absolutely. I mean, I've seen those 3, Kuntz, Ford, and Yurosek, all the way from, 4 to 8. There's personal preference on those tight ends. I had alluded to a tight end, only 2, Trey McBride, and I couldn't believe this, Matt, when I was doing my research this week. Zach Kuntz had 100 targets with Old Dominion. Him and Trey, I mean,
Old Dominion came on. I mean, they finished the season with like 6 or 7 wins in a row. Yeah, they really came on.
And it's funny. They have 3 legitimate fantasy players. Blake Watson at running back, Allie Jennings at wide receiver.
Allie Jennings, he came through.
But I looked at their schedule. It's probably a 5 if everything goes another 6-win season. Like, they have some hard opening games. I just don't see them winning. But I do think they'll score points. So I was shocked. So Kuntz is a transfer from Penn State. I started to look him up. He was a 4-star prospect, Matt. He just could not get on the field at Penn State. We know Penn State brings in uber athletes. We've seen it with Mike Gesicki, Pat Freiermuth. They have some depth at the position this year that Penn State hopes. Kuntz could not get on the field. He also, I was reading an interview with him, he also said he wasn't mature enough and ready for college. So he's 6'8", 245 pounds, which in a way I think 6'8" is really tall for an 18 or 19-year-old young man in a physical, right? In a physical game. Mm-hmm. But he says he's grown up. He matured. He was ready. His body, he filled out. And at Old Dominion, he just exploded. So he's very interested. Marshawn Ford. I like him because he's attached to Malik Cunningham. It's not that much rocket science, Matt. Anyone, check out the depth chart of Louisville wide receivers. It's not pretty, folks.
They lost Tyler Harrell, who was pretty much going to be the main guy, right? He was going to take over that kind of that Tutu Atwell type role. And he went to Alabama.
He went to Alabama. Yeah. They don't have – I'm not in love. Now, one of the young men may pop. Louisville something could arise off the waiver wire that we're not aware of. But right now, I look at the Cardinals depth chart and I say, Marshawn Ford's probably the best pass catcher right now on the team. He's a redshirt senior starting his 5th year. And I'm getting a player who I have in my top 5 attached to my top 5 quarterbacks. So I like Marshawn Ford. Yurosek, Matt, it's all about Stanford. they're not Iowa, but they're pretty good with guys like Zach Ertz in the NFL. Wisconsin, Iowa, Stanford, they kind of all recruit the same type of athlete who goes to those schools. They're big, they're strong, physical players, smart in the passing game, not necessarily athletically explosive. That's why Noah Fant was so interested. He was probably the most athletically explosive tight end at these schools we've seen in a long time. Urasek fits that mold. Who's it? Tanner McKee, right? He's the quarterback. He's one of those Debbie quarterbacks people are looking at. He's getting some attention over this summer. If Tanner McGee, people like him. I have to do more research
today.
What?
I said I just got done watching his tape before we
did?
Yeah.
Okay, so I got to watch him. He's getting some national attention. But if he's going to hit, well, they're going to use the tight end. So I like Urasek. And you mentioned it.
Stanford lost at least one, if not two, wide receivers to the draft this year. I think one to graduation, one to the draft. So there's opportunity there as well.
Absolutely. That's so I like him and he's coming, I think, after the double-digit rounds. And that's a nice value. Michael Mayer, what can we say? Matt, 5-star prospect, walks on to Notre Dame, played 2. He's been unbelievable, Matt. He's been unfreaking believable in the first 2 years. Hey, he might be the number 1 draft pick, and I'm talking about top 15 if he comes through and puts on tape what I think he's capable of.
Absolutely.
Because I think the NFL is going to love Michael Mayer, 6'4", 251 with the pass-catching chops, and he's kind of nasty. I would say this. He's so much better than Trey McBride. And Trey McBride, we all liked. He was the number 1 tight end. I think he's much, much better than him. Now, the reason I have Michael Mayer over Brock Bowers, and you can tell me if you agree or not, Matt, I'm worried about all the tight end depth at Georgia.
I'm worried about everything about Georgia.
Yeah, right?
Always. Yeah. I just don't trust them. Like sometimes
it's hard to trust offensive fantasy players. Absolutely. Give me the defense. Give me the defense. I know they're going to win games, but fantasy?
No.
Last year, Brock Bowers had 81 targets. That was a result of the offense. Remember, George Pickens didn't play early in the year. Eric Gilbert wasn't even on the field. Now they brought in new freshmen who are good, right? So I think
he's got Oscar Delp right behind him, ready for playing time. We don't know what Eric Gilbert's going to be playing. We're going to get into that in the mailbag, right?
Yeah.
And it's still Stetson Bennett.
Yeah. And this is the thing. I can't imagine him doing this, Matt. He had 13 receiving touchdowns on 56 catches, which is a 23% touchdown to reception rate. That is not replicatable. Maybe, I have him projected at 10 touchdowns. He also had 1 rushing touchdown. He might have 8. And if he only has 8 touchdowns or 10 touchdowns, he's not going to do what he did last year. It was a perfect storm. He was the best pass catcher on a great team that was undefeated, and they just peppered him with so many targets, and his touchdowns were unbelievable. I just don't see that happening again. And
when you look at it, right? You look at a guy like Kuntz, right? You look at a guy like Ford, the way we've been talking about him, even Urosek, right? Those offenses need that tight end, right? Michael Mayer in Notre Dame, they need Michael Mayer to succeed in order for their offense to work the way it does. It's no knock on Brock Bowers. He's extremely talented. But Georgia cannot use Brock Bowers and get similar results elsewhere, right? And that's a reflection of talent and scheme. And so it's hard to use a high draft pick for me, even knowing the talent. CFF isn't always about the talent, right? This isn't Devi, right? And that's what's really challenging. It's not always about the talent. And so I don't have any Brock Bowers in seasonal CFF. I probably won't. I don't see myself paying that price, but I am willing to pay it for Mayer.
Matt, I agree with you on Mayer. I have Mayer. I think we both had Mayer ranked ahead. I think he's a second-round pick. I have no real problem with that value. I don't think I'm paying a second or third round price tag for Brock Bowers in my
Not
drafts.
doing it.
I think it's not replicatable, I think, in my book. And Michael Trigg, man, the cat got out of the bag, 3 touchdowns in the spring game. God darn it. I mean, he was a nice little sleeper who was further down. If this was in February, he was further down the rankings. Nice player through the transfer portal. He played with Jackson Dart at USC, 4-star prospect from Florida, goes to Mississippi. And Matt, everything I read on Michael Trigg from the Mississippi beat reporters, the coaching staff, Lane Kiffin, it's just glowing. Like, I think they could use him in that Elijah Moore type of role. Just put him on the line of scrimmage. Maybe you move him out to the slot, and Michael Trigg is going to be a problem in Lane Kiffin's offense. Because also, he's 6'3", 240. So he's not your classic inline blocker. You want this young man in motion. You want him on defensive backs more than linebackers. I think he's going to have a very good season for Mississippi.
All right, let's get into the listener mailbag here. Again, we have pulled up questions from our viewers, from Twitter followers, from patrons in the Discord here. So we're going to talk through some mostly tight end CFF questions here. Our first one comes in here from Sal. If you don't get one of the top tight ends in a CFF startup draft, so I'm guessing we're talking in a dynasty CFF context here, is it better to wait until really, really late and take a bunch of dart throws, or do you kind of force it more in the middle of the draft? And I'll give my quick answer here, John. For me, it doesn't matter if it's seasonal or dynasty. If I'm not getting a top tier guy, I'm just going to wait. I've been in a few seasonal drafts already this year in CFF, and I haven't gotten on those guys early, just the way the boards have fallen. And at that point, I'm waiting until rounds 9, 10, 11. In a dynasty CFF context, that's not changing a lot for me.
Matt, I will say in general, I am a dumpster diver at the tight end position. I've done 7 drafts so far. I have not taken Michael Mayer or Brock Bowers in any of the 7. I will say this, though. I do like those players right now between 3 and 9. So in the 7th or 8th round, if I'm looking at my board and let's say 4 of the 6 are gone, I tend to tap into that. But
unless it's Payne Durham.
So I will say, to answer Sal's question, I do like to last. In a perfect scenario, I wouldn't take a tight end until round 12 or later. And then I'm willing to take some shots. He has some very good questions. I'll give you some players. My number 1 deep sleeper is Isaac Rex out of BYU. When he had Zach Wilson 2 years ago, Matt, as a freshman, he scored 12 touchdowns. He got hurt last year, and they switched quarterbacks. Jaron Hall, who we talked about when we did the show, when we were talking about Puka Nacua 2 weeks ago, I think Isaac Rex is the next best pass catcher on the Cougars. I don't think you'll get 12 touchdowns, but I could see 8 touchdowns for the young man. I've gotten him, I think, in 4 or 5 of my drafts right now, so I like him a lot. Interesting. Jack Beck, LSU. Matt, what if LSU hits on offense? What if Kelly gets that offense going? It's not, I don't see it necessarily, but at the same time, Kelly's been successful offensively, and Beck is one of those guys, he's kind of a tweener. He's in between. I like him too. He's a late round pick. And then I don't think I've talked about him on any podcast. And I'm probably going to get his name wrong, Sal, so I apologize. Michael Ezeki, UCLA. Chip Kelly uses their tight ends. Greg Dulcich is gone. Michael Ezeki, UCLA Bruins, is another late round dart that I like.
One late round guy I've been taking a shot on here, digging a little bit deeper, is Nolan Matthews Harris out of SMU. Just another program that uses their tight ends well. So
they do.
I think when you're taking dart throws, you're looking for opportunity and system. That sounds repetitive for what we say a lot on these CFF preview shows, but kind of fits the mold. John, our next set of questions here, they're both Eric Gilbert related, so I think we'll do a 2-for-1 here. Feverish Finero asks us, will Eric Gilbert enter the NFL draft as a tight end, or will he enter as a wide receiver? And our buddy Brandon Lejeune asked if we feel the Eric Gilbert rebirth is real. So, John, I'll let you answer first whether or not you think that his rebirth will happen this year, and then where you think he ends up in the NFL. And for folks who may not be as familiar with Eric Gilbert, was a tight end recruit coming out, played tight end at LSU. There's been reports at different points in time that he's been reclassified by Georgia as a wide receiver and or tight end.
So this is how highly rated Gilbert was coming out of high school, Matt. 5-star prospect by 24/7 Sports. And he was the first true tight end since its inception in 1985 to win the Gatorade National Player of the Year award in 2019. So you're talking about a young man who's coming in from the high school level with as highly decorated. I think in some dynasty CFF leagues or Devy leagues, he was like easily a first-round pick in 2020. Like, people were incredibly bullish on Eric Gilbert. Now, unfortunately, and I've said this on my other ITL podcast, the young man had some challenges off the field, and I've always hoped that he's overcome whatever challenges because he really didn't do anything at LSU. He ends up at Georgia. I'm a believe it. I have to see it to believe it. Does he have the talent? Yes, Matt. To answer Brandon's question, I'm hoping the young man does. I'm hoping he gets on the field. I think this might be a good spot because he doesn't have to be the star. We were just talking about Brock Bowers. Excuse me. Eric Gilbert, all he has to do is stay healthy and on the field and do what the coaching staff asks of the young man. So I'm not sure fantasy-wise with Brock Bowers, and there's so much talent there. And we just mentioned you can't trust Georgia. How productive he's going to be is a different story. Then Finero, my man Feverish. This is a tough question. He's a classic tweener. If I'm going for the money as his agent, I want him to be a wide receiver. If I wanted to get him on the field and make him a high draft pick, I want him as a tight end. 6'5", 248. He looks a little thin, but that could be deceptive. I mean, I wish he was like 260. Imagine if he is 260 with that athleticism. So I don't know where he's going to go at this. My guess would be tight end. I don't know if he has the burst or the wiggle or the separation of a wide receiver. I think he's more physical at the point of attack, but he's a little undersized. What do you think, Matt, about him for NFL tight end or wide receiver?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult question because that tight end position is becoming a more and more gray position, right? Most NFL teams are using at least one tight end on the roster as a quasi wide receiver. So if I'm the NFL, if I'm an NFL team, like you mentioned, I want to draft him as a tight end. And NFL teams ultimately, they're the ones who write the position on the card, right? And so they ultimately decide what that player is going to be considered. And here's the thing. Eric Gilbert could come out this year, put up a huge season statistically, and he still will not have the leverage going into next year's NFL draft, right? This past the whatever has happened for the last year and a half, justifiably or not, is going to really surround his NFL draft process, and that it's going to hurt his draft capital, again, justifiably or not. So Eric Gilbert isn't going to be the one with the leverage. So I think he's going to be classified as a tight end. I think you're going to see Georgia use him in specific packages as a tight end. Specific packages, they're going to light him up out wide. So it's more of a technicality than anything. But I know Finero loves his tight ends. It's like part of the brand. So for you, Finero, I'll say he's going to be a tight end for you.
All right, Matt, you just said something interesting. I think they will scheme one or two big play potentials for Gilbert. like just literally so he can flash and show his athletic ability. But how often are they going to do that? Like maybe 1 or 2 plays every week where you go, whoa, right? But is he going to be consistent? I'm not sure. I don't think so. And I think tight end is the better long-term goal for him.
And John, we've kind of alluded to this, but there was one more Bowers question / Gilbert question, which is, is there a world where both of these guys finish as top 25 CFF tight ends? And we did actually already allude to the second part of CFF on IG's question, which is Bowers' touchdown percent rate a fluke? I think we both agree that that's probably going to regress back to a more realistic level. I think there is a world where both of these guys could be top 25 tight ends, but it's not a world I'm willing to bet on because I just don't trust that they, again, need Eric Gilbert to be a top 25 CFF tight end.
And if Eric Gilbert is going to be top 25, you're looking at 450 yards and probably 5 touchdowns, 6 touchdowns. Well, Matt, that will eat into Brock Bowers a decent chunk. So instead of the number 2, Brock Bowers was the number 8 in that scenario. So, I mean, it's not a good thing for fantasy. These two are going to hurt each other, I think, a little bit.
Absolutely. John, let's end on this one here. Brandon at Lepo, sorry, LEPP_O, Lepo, asks us, we always hear about favorite values or sleepers. So to be contrarian here, who are the players you're staying away from? Guys you do not want to draft.
I looked at all my rosters, and I'm lower on these players than everyone else, Matt, rankings, and I have not drafted one share. So I'm staying on brand. I don't want to give anyone information that I'm not honest about. I have 0 Tyler Van Dyke. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
A Michigan offensive coordinator coming over does not do it for me. I know everyone, but it was Harbaugh. I don't care. Chris Paul didn't impress me at Oregon. I've not been impressed with either of these 2 men who are now running the Miami system. I don't like Van Dyke because there's also no rushing upside. Matt, if he takes a dip in touchdown percentage or his yards, if he's not thrown for 320 yards, I mean, I could easily see Van Dyke going for 270 and 2 touchdowns. Matt, in college fantasy football, that's not getting you anything. Like, so I think he's way overpriced and hyped up. Second one, I don't have any shares, and I know there's a lot of people who like him. Travis Dye, USC. Lincoln Riley, he frustrates me too much. At times he's been good, but more often than not, he's going to rotate guys in. I know he finally settled on Kennedy Brooks, but was Kennedy Brooks really that great last year as a running back? He was a flex running back in the right matchup, right? He was a nice player. People are drafting Travis Dye like he's the number 2, their number 2 running back. I've seen him go as the number 1 on teams. So and
he was just fine for Oregon. Like, he was fine, but it wasn't. And I know he put up good CFF numbers, but he had to. Like, there was no other option. There's another option at USC. There's a lot of them through the air.
And they have a rushing quarterback in Caleb Williams, who's going to steal carries at the goal line. So I'm just not as high on Travis Dye. Mississippi's too crowded. Jalen Robinson, the transfer from UCF. I like him. I like the player. He originally went to Oklahoma, went to UCF. He rocked it, Matt, in the American Athletic Conference in a wide open offense with Dylan Gabriel. He's going to Mississippi in the SEC. I'm sorry, Matt. He has not faced this level of cornerback every day on the field that he faced in the American Athletic Conference as a little bit undersized. I think he's too pricey, and they have like 3 wide receivers. Who knows which one yet? And I've heard rumors that Mingo might be the guy. And then there's other people who say it's Robinson. So I don't have any of him. And then maybe I got burnt with Jahleel Billingsley last year too much.
Oh, yeah.
But the way Alabama has devised this passing game, Matt, with their explosive wide receivers, they have a pass-catching running back. I don't understand why people are drafting Cameron Latou I think he was a defensive lineman or something who moved over to tight end to Alabama. Yeah, he had some like wide open scheme. They got him open in the end zone, or he had a wide open reception. Alabama's not running the offense through the tight end position. Unlike Stanford, Alabama doesn't need their tight end to put anything on the board. So those are the four who I think are overpriced. I don't have any shares.
Yeah, I don't have any Brendan Armstrong. I think you're reacting to last season with Brendan Armstrong. We have a new coaching staff in there. Another situation of he needed to put his team on his back last year. And I just think he's overpriced for what they're charging right now, or what ADP is charging, I should say. Devin Achane out of Texas A&M. I just don't trust the offense, man. I don't trust Texas A&M. I don't know what's going on with the quarterback situation there. I don't know the receivers. I mean, we keep hearing that, there's going to be a new set of receivers coming up. I think they're still 2 years ahead from being, really offensively driven. I think they're still going to be defensively driven. And I think Chain's going to have a good season. Like he's going to be fine. If you're drafting him, that's great. I just think he's going much higher than I'm willing to take him. So I'm not too interested in him. And then I'm also not paying the price for Isaiah Nayer right now. I get why you're excited about that Texas offense, but it's going to go through Xavier Worthy. You mentioned Jaleel Billingsley. I think he's going to get on the field. We have other depth-based pieces for the wide receivers, and the offense is still very much going to be focused on Bijan Robinson. Remember, we're elevating Quinn Ewers to a level he may hit, but I think we're taking a step forward. Maybe a little bit prematurely on Quinn Ewers. I do think ADP understands that hesitation, but it doesn't understand the hesitation with Isaiah Nayer. So Nayer was originally really interesting. I almost feel like he's got this like residual interest because he spent like 2 days at Tennessee, technically verbally committed. And folks, I think still think he's in the Josh Heupel offense. And no knock on the Steve Sarkisian offense. It's also friendly to wide receivers, but it's not quite that same offense. And so I think we need to understand that Nayer is option 2 at best, probably 3 at best in that offense. And I'm just not willing to pay that high price. So those would be the guys that I'm fading. And John, before we fade out for the end of this episode, I want to make sure that we take a moment here to talk about the reason here behind what we're doing for the CFF Kings Classic this year.
Excellent. And Matt, we are now up to almost $1,600 in donations. Our goal is $2,500. We're almost there. We're going to run it all the way to the draft on August 13th. I'll probably end like the 14th. And then we will make whatever we collect to St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. I really believe in it. If you have a young child who needs to go to the hospital and you don't have financial resources, St. Jude is 100% free for the family and for the child. They do great work. Please go to my Twitter handle, GridironSkull91, and you can hit the donation button there, and every little bit helps.
Fantastic. Thanks for checking out this episode of the Rookie Big Board, focusing on our top 12 college fantasy football tight ends and having a lot of fun opening up the listener mailbag. As always, we appreciate you checking out this episode.